Security, get her out of the line, now! The gate agent's voice cracked like a gunshot across gate D12. Before Nadine Blake could respond, a security guard gripped her arm, tight and sudden. She didn't scream. She didn't pull back. She simply turned, held up her boarding pass, and said, "I'm in seat 2A." The guard didn't even glance. He jerked her away from the first-class boarding lane like she was a trespasser, not a paying customer. A few people in line stared. Some reached for their phones. And then came the voice Nadine had heard too many times in her life. Same tone, different face. "She doesn't look like first class anyway." That was it. That was the line. Not from an agent, not from staff, just another passenger, loud enough for others to hear, and too comfortable saying it in public. Then, it happened. The giant departure screens above the terminal flickered. Once, twice, then black. Gate D12's announcement system cut out mid-sentence. The boarding scan lights turned off. The surrounding counters froze. Confused passengers turned to each other. Staff frantically tapped keyboards. Airport security radios buzzed, searching for answers. And Nadine? She stood still, calm, quiet, watching the system unravel in real time. What would you do if someone humiliated you in public? Then the whole airport froze. Tell us where you're watching from, because this story is just lifting off. Nadine Blake had been through worse. She'd walked into meetings where people assumed she was the assistant. She'd pitched to boards that credited her ideas to junior men in the room. She'd been followed through luxury stores, ignored by cab drivers, undercut in billion-dollar contracts, all with a smile and a degree from MIT. But this was different. This was public. She looked around gate D12. No fewer than 3 phones were pointed in her direction. She knew how this would be spun. A woman making a scene. A boarding misunderstanding, a first-class mix-up. No one ever talked about the thousands of tiny paper cuts that came before moments like these. No one ever saw the system quietly slice people like her, day by day, through assumption, doubt, and silence. But Nadine Blake was not here to bleed quietly today. She glanced down at her phone. No missed calls, no alerts. Good. The team was in position. The protocol, written years ago, was already in motion. You built the system, Nadine. You know how it fails. Now show them what happens when it does. 30 years ago, she stood in her mother's shadow at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. Her mom, Della, worked overnight shifts, mopping floors, emptying bins, scrubbing bathrooms that business travelers barely noticed. One night, young Nadine had asked, "Why don't you come in through the front like everyone else?" Her mom had smiled, tired, firm. "One day, baby, you'll walk through that front door like you own the whole place. And when someone tries to stop you, don't yell, just shut the whole thing down." That memory came back now as the guard's grip tightened on her arm again. "Ma'am, I need you to calm down," he barked, voice rising. Nadine looked him straight in the eye. "I haven't said a word." But her phone was already in her hand. Her thumb unlocked the app. A 4-digit code, a fingerprint scan. Then one quiet line of text. Initiate 47B, Skylinks. Tag, D12, red level, confirm. No theatrics, no threats, just a kill switch. 20 seconds later, Craig Minter, Skylinks' Miami ground operations manager, stormed onto the scene. Late 50s, always looking like someone owed him an apology. His eyes scanned the frozen gate systems, then landed on Nadine like a heat-seeking missile. "What is going on here?" he snapped. The gate agent rushed to his side. "She said she had a first-class ticket, sir, but it didn't match our system right away, and she refused to move." "She," Nadine cut in, "has a name and a confirmed ticket in seat 2A. Craig ignored her. "Get her out of here while we reset the system. Call for a backup agent." Nadine stepped forward, not loud, but crystal clear. "Touch me again, and you'll be triggering a legal clause that ends more than your shift." He scoffed. "I don't know who you think you are, but—" "You don't," Nadine said. That's the problem. Behind them, another departure board blinked off. Security radios lit up. Then a new voice crackled over the PA, one not pre-recorded. "Attention all Skylink staff. Temporary halt in boarding operations is now in effect at gates D10 through D18. Further instructions to follow." Passengers gasped. A woman in a power suit near gate D13 whispered, "What the hell is going on?" Craig looked pale. "What did you do?" Nadine didn't answer. She didn't need to. From her phone, a secure server had sent an alert to 3 agencies: FAA Regional Enforcement DIOT Compliance Board, her own company, Blake Infrastructure Group. Why? Because Nadine Blake wasn't just a passenger. She wasn't just a CEO. She was the chief architect behind the Flight Access Act, a federal protocol created to protect passengers from systemic discrimination, buried deep in FAA's internal systems. Clause 47B in particular was hers, designed for exactly this situation. If a federal certified airline engages in a pattern of discriminatory boarding practices at any facility maintained through federal infrastructure funding, operations at said facility may be lawfully suspended pending investigation. Guess who funded this terminal's last renovation? Blake Infrastructure. Guess who flagged a compliance breach just now? Nadine Blake. And guess who just triggered a halt in Skylink's operations at 14 federally supported airports across the country? She adjusted her blazer sleeve, stepped slightly to the side, and opened her messages. Her assistant had already confirmed. FAA notified. DIOT acknowledged. Media embargo active. PR standing by. Perfect. Nadine looked at the security guard, now standing rigid like a man who just realized he laid hands on someone who might sign his paycheck. She said softly, "I suggest you release my arm, for your own sake." He let go. Nadine stepped back into line, not to board, but to witness. Gate D12, just moments ago full of noise and assumption, had gone eerily still. The system had spoken. And Nadine? She'd only just begun. Before the guard grabbed her arm, before the screen blacked out, before the whispers started flying across gate D12, Dr. Nadine Blake had already made peace with one truth. People rarely recognize power when it walks in quietly, and she'd spent a lifetime walking in quietly, not by choice, by strategy. Because in America, power dressed as an older black woman in a tailored blazer and quiet shoes doesn't scream for attention. It waits for the right moment to move, and then it doesn't ask for permission. Nadine had boarded hundreds of first-class flights before, from Seattle to Singapore. She had contracts in motion on every major continent except Antarctica. But airports were personal. Her mother, Della, had spent 34 years working nights in one. Della Blake was a quiet fighter, the kind who taught Nadine early how to stand tall even when nobody offered a chair. She was the reason Nadine memorized airport layouts before she memorized long division. The reason she'd learned how to navigate terminals, tension, and the sound of her name being mispronounced over intercoms long before she ever stood behind a podium. And that morning, Nadine had boarded her town car in Georgetown with a mission. Not for revenge. Not even for justice. She was heading to Washington, D.C. to sign off on the largest infrastructure reallocation of her career, $2.1 billion in federal upgrades to 4 commercial airports. Her company, Blake Infrastructure Group, had secured the contracts through precision, not noise. The kind of precision that rebuilt runways on time, under budget, and fully compliant with environmental policy and equity hiring mandates. The kind of precision that didn't leave room for ego. She didn't take limos. She didn't carry assistants through terminals like ornaments. She didn't need red carpet. But she did need one thing: dignity. And that's the thing most systems forgot to offer women like her. People always assumed Blake Infrastructure was run by someone else. They'd look at her in meetings and ask, "When will Dr. Blake be joining us?" She'd lean in and say, "She already has." They'd blink, then stumble. Then say something polite and dumb. But by then, it was too late. Nadine already knew who they were. She remembered being 29, sitting at a meeting in Dallas to pitch her first airfield upgrade proposal. The client, a wealthy, white, ex-military CEO, had looked at her and said, "No offense, Ms. Blake, but this is a man's game. Are you sure you've got the steel for it?" She didn't argue. She walked out. 6 months later, his board voted him out and brought Blake Infrastructure in. Quietly, efficiently, legally, without headlines. Nadine didn't believe in grandstanding. She believed in results with receipts, and that's why, years later, she'd been approached, quietly, by members of the FAA and DOT to help design a federal-level ethics protocol for airline operations. The proposal was simple on paper, radical in impact. If a federally certified airline engaged in a pattern of discriminatory boarding practices, they could be temporarily suspended from all operations at facilities funded by federal infrastructure dollars. That clause? Clause 47B. The nickname inside the agency was the Blake Switch. It had never been activated. Until today. When she wrote it, she thought about her mother. She thought about the cleaning crews who got stopped at employee entrances because someone assumed they didn't belong. She thought about the business travelers who kept receipts to prove they had paid for first class, even though no one else had to. She thought about every woman of color who had been told, directly or indirectly, "Prove it." And now, ironically, Skylynx Airlines had walked into her claws with both feet and a clipboard full of bad judgment. Back at gate D12, Nadine stood quietly beside her bag. The guard who had manhandled her earlier now stood 3 feet away, awkward and unsure, eyes flicking between her and the frozen monitors. The gate agent, young, blonde, trying to pretend she wasn't rattled, kept glancing at the growing crowd of passengers. Some had begun filming again. Others had questions. A few just stared at Nadine like she was the problem. But they didn't know. They didn't know this woman had personally negotiated infrastructure frameworks with 4 U.S. presidents. They didn't know she had testified before Congress 6 times, once on crutches after falling on an icy airstrip in Minneapolis. They didn't know that when the FAA needed someone to audit the nation's boarding equity policies, she'd done it. Pro bono, thorough, merciless, fair. They didn't know she'd refused press interviews for 2 decades because she didn't want attention. She wanted change. They didn't know that in her briefcase were 12 signed letters from state transportation secretaries, all backing her enforcement recommendations for a national flight ethics charter. The very document Skylynx had refused to sign earlier that year. Because in private, their CEO had said, "We don't need that DEI stuff. Passengers care about miles and snacks, not feelings." And Nadine had smiled. Not sweetly, not kindly. Strategically. So when she tapped her assistant with the single-word message, "Now," she wasn't reacting out of emotion. She was executing a contingency, one that had been reviewed, approved, and legally backed at the federal level. And still, as the systems blinked and the boarding froze, Nadine didn't gloat. She simply stood there, still holding her phone, still watching the wheels lock up. Not just the wheels of the plane, but the wheels of arrogance turning toward a crash. Because this wasn't about her anymore. This was about precedent. This was about the next woman who'd walk through gate D12 and get asked to prove she belonged. This was about making sure that question would never be asked again. Not at that gate, not in that tone, not on her watch. In a matter of minutes, the first airport email alerts would hit inboxes across the country. Subject line: Federal compliance breach. Skylynx suspension initiated. By noon, 3 more terminals would begin lockdown procedures on Skylynx gates. By evening, Skylynx stock would dip 17% after word leaked of a multi-state contract freeze. By midnight, their CEO would be in an emergency board meeting trying to explain how a first-class seat turned into a billion-dollar disaster. And Nadine? She'd be sitting in her townhouse in Georgetown with chamomile tea, a legal debrief in one hand and a boarding pass in the other, still unused. Because for once, she didn't need to fly to Washington to make change. She'd already landed it. She remembered the smell first. Bleach, old carpet, vending machine coffee. The kind of scent that clung to utility closets, mop buckets, and late-night exhaustion. Nadine was 10 when she first saw the backside of an airport. Not the terminals with jazz playing and glass windows. Not the lounges or the bookstores or the moving walkways. No, this was the other side. The part of the airport people like her mother worked in, not traveled through. It was a cold January night in Atlanta. Her mom's shift had run late. The babysitter canceled last minute. So Della had done what working mothers always did. She made it work. Grab your coat, baby, but don't talk. Just keep close to me, all right? They slipped through the staff-only side door of Hartsfield-Jackson. Nadine held her mother's coat tightly, dodging wet floor signs and tired sighs from janitors whose names no one ever learned. Della didn't speak much that night. She didn't need to. She just pushed her mop cart forward, head high, like she belonged. Because she did. She'd worked there 10 years already. Knew every gate by number, every supervisor by nickname. She could spot which bathrooms needed attention just by watching which terminal had the longest delays. And that night, as little Nadine sat curled on a folded hoodie behind a janitor closet, she heard the muffled intercom voice overhead. Flight 227 to Washington, D.C., now boarding first class. The words felt like they came from a different universe. "What's first class?" she asked. Della gave a soft smile, still scrubbing a sink. "That's the front of the plane, baby. The nice part. Do we get to ride in that someday?" Her mother paused, not a beat, a breath. Then, "You will. One day, you'll walk through that gate like you own it, but not just to ride up front." She stood up straight. "You'll build the airport." That memory sat with Nadine now like an old song stuck in her chest as she stood at gate D12. Decades later, being treated like a fraud for holding a ticket she paid for. It wasn't just about her. It was never just about her. It was about how a system learns to doubt women like Della, like Nadine, like so many others who walk into clean spaces still carrying the scent of bleach on their skin, whether the world sees it or not. The irony? She had built the airport. Well, not with her hands, not with bricks or drills, but every terminal that now bore the automated flow systems, the solar grid switchboards, the multilingual boarding infrastructure, the quiet room acoustics for travelers with PTSD, all of that. That was Nadine's blueprint, literally. Her firm had drafted the implementation plans, signed off on the specs, supervised the contractors, coordinated with the FAA. At least 5 airports she'd helped design were featured in international publications for next-gen accessibility. And still they saw her as some lady who couldn't afford Seat 2A. It never really changed, did it? After the boards blacked out and the announcement stopped, Nadine had stepped to the side. Not out of fear, but out of clarity. Let them watch. Let them whisper. Let them guess. Because every second they spent underestimating her was another second she could rewrite the outcome. That was always her strategy. Let them reveal themselves first, then act. She remembered her first internship at a regional airport in Baton Rouge. They'd had her cleaning terminals until they found something more technical for her. She held a 3.9 GPA and a partial ride from MIT. But the white supervisor had said, "If you're too proud to clean, you're too proud to lead." She cleaned for 2 weeks, then filed an internal report about the terminal's violation of ADA codes, faulty fire evacuation protocols, and 3 undocumented workers on the contractor payroll. 2 months later, the supervisor was gone. 6 months later, she got her first consulting offer. It wasn't vengeance that drove her. It was memory. It was structure. You can't change what you won't confront. And Nadine had been confronting injustice with spreadsheets, policy drafts, and flawless timelines for 40 years. Now she was watching the entire Skylink's operational system hiccup in real time. She could almost hear the emails flying back and forth. She imagined the chief operations officer checking Slack messages in horror, the PR team scrambling to decide if they should wait it out or own it. The CEO half-dressed on a golf course trying to call the D-Out hotline. And gate D12? Dead silent now. People were sitting down, watching her, trying to figure out who this woman was who had stopped their morning commute without raising her voice. That's when a young woman in a navy pantsuit approached, maybe early 30s, clutching a laptop bag, nervous energy in her steps. "I'm sorry," she said softly. I saw what happened. That agent, she didn't even look at your boarding pass." Nadine gave a nod. "Yes, I noticed." The woman hesitated, then added, "I work in city planning. I read about your firm in modern infrastructure. You're Dr. Blake?" Nadine's expression didn't change, but she extended a hand. "Nadine. Just Nadine is fine." The woman shook it like she'd just met a head of state. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." That wasn't the first time it had happened, and Nadine knew it wouldn't be the last. Women, young, brilliant, rising, came up to her all the time. In coffee shops, in after-panel side doors, in elevators after public forums. They didn't come to praise her. They came to say, "I saw what you did, and now I know it's possible." That was why Nadine had never sought fame. Visibility was never her goal. Legacy was. The kind you build in contracts, in legislation, in clauses buried deep in operational language that no racist middle manager could sidestep. And today was proof that her work wasn't theory. It was real-time consequence. Across the tarmac, a Skylynx plane sat idle, still connected to the gate, but lifeless. Passengers inside probably didn't even know why they hadn't moved. Craig Minter, the gate supervisor, was pacing in circles now, red-faced, phone to his ear, throwing glances her way every few seconds. She wondered what lie he was trying to sell, what version of the story he was peddling to his bosses, what revision of the truth would hit the report later today. But Nadine didn't care, because in 37 minutes, she would be on a private call with the FAA Enforcement Division delivering her evidence. Clause 47B was no longer a warning. It was a documented violation. And every airport that used federal funding to support Skylynx operations was about to receive the same notification. Temporary operations suspended, pending ethics review. Source: Blake Infrastructure Federal Oversight Division. Nadine didn't plan to say anything else this morning. She didn't need to. The system she built was speaking louder than any headline ever could. And as she turned to find a seat near the window, letting the morning sun stretch across her shoes, she thought again of her mother, of bleach and vending machine coffee, and a promise made in the back hallway of an airport. "One day, baby, you'll walk through that gate like you own it." Today, she hadn't just walked through it. She'd stopped it. She'd flipped the script. And she'd rewritten the rules for every girl who'd ever been told she didn't belong in seat 2A. The airline terminal was no longer a place of movement. It was a place of murmurs. Passengers who had just been impatiently checking their boarding groups now stood idle, their eyes darting to monitors that no longer changed. The boarding gate at D12, once buzzing with announcements and agent chatter, was frozen, literally and figuratively. The Skylynx system had locked itself from within. And yet, Nadine Blake hadn't moved. She still stood near the rope divider, a quiet center in a hurricane of consequence. Two TSA officers hovered nearby, no longer sure what protocol applied. They weren't trained for this, not for someone who could make calls that froze federal systems, not for a woman who hadn't shouted, hadn't argued, hadn't even raised her voice, but had instead sent one quiet message and brought a multi-billion-dollar operation to a halt. Craig Minter, Skylynx's head of operations for Eastern routes, appeared with sweat at his collar and panic in his voice. He didn't run, but he walked fast enough to tell everyone he wasn't used to walking at all. He looked at the gate agent, then at the TSA officers, then finally, reluctantly, at her. "Nadine," he said, like he was hoping she wouldn't recognize him. She did. Of course she did. They'd met years ago during a federal infrastructure summit in Baltimore. He was a mid-level compliance officer back then. He'd thanked her for her presentation and told her he'd never met a black woman with such command over systems. He meant it as a compliment. She'd never forgotten it wasn't. "Can we speak privately?" Craig asked. Nadine gave a single nod and walked with him toward the window. Not far, just out of earshot. "This situation," he said, trying to keep his voice even, "is escalating fast. Our back-end terminals have gone dark. FAA won't return our calls, and the holding gates at JFK and Denver just stopped accepting our inbound flights." "I'm aware," Nadine said. Craig's voice cracked a little. You pulled a 47B on us?" Nadine didn't answer directly. She just looked at him. His next sentence came in a rush. "Look, whatever happened at the gate, I'm sure it was a misunderstanding. We'll retrain the staff. We'll issue a public apology. We'll even name the gate after you. Hell, we'll name the terminal after you if you want. But Nadine, this isn't just a glitch. It's a full-scale chokehold. You're strangling our infrastructure in real time." Nadine's gaze didn't waver. "No, Craig. You're experiencing the cost of arrogance in real time." Craig tried to laugh it off. "Come on, Nadine. You're not a spiteful woman." "No," she said. "I'm a systems woman. And I built this system to identify patterns. Patterns your airline was warned about multiple times. Discriminatory boarding practices. Undisclosed passenger profiling. Routine denials of access to passengers of color without written cause. Your internal audit team flagged it last quarter." He swallowed hard. "You buried it," she said. Silence. "And then today," she continued, "your team decided to tell a 60-year-old black woman with a paid first-class ticket that she didn't look like she belonged." Craig looked at her, and for the first time, the weight of it all settled in his eyes. "You really flipped the switch." "I didn't flip it," she said. "The system did. I designed it to respond exactly this way, without favoritism, without hesitation. This isn't about me. This is about every woman like me who gets told to stand aside. And now, your entire route access is standing aside, indefinitely." Back at the gate, word was spreading. Screens displayed a strange phrase across every Skylinks flight. "Boarding unavailable. Compliance hold initiated." Passengers grew restless. Some filmed, some tweeted, some just stared. One young man in a suit whispered, "I think that lady shut down the airline." He wasn't wrong. Meanwhile, across the country, other Skylinks terminals were entering a cascade freeze. At Atlanta Hartsfield, a Skylinks flight was turned back from the taxiway. At O'Hare, ground crews were told to stand down on gate prep. In Dallas, emails buzzed through legal departments. Review Clause 47B, suspension live. FAA's East Coast Command quietly triggered a sector-wide hold on Skylinks for all federally subsidized gates. The cost? $3.2 billion in contracts paused or frozen within 17 minutes. Nadine hadn't even raised her voice. The most surreal moment came next. A local journalist, alerted by a tip-off, arrived and began live streaming from near the terminal. He turned the camera to the crowd and zoomed in on Nadine. His voice was hushed but urgent. "This is developing fast. What you're seeing behind me is likely the result of an FAA-triggered compliance freeze due to ethics clause violations. And according to multiple sources, the woman standing near Gate D12 is Dr. Nadine Blake. Yes, the Nadine Blake. The architect of the very system now locking this airline down." That live stream would go viral within the hour. But Nadine wasn't focused on cameras. She stood still, as calm as ever, watching Craig pace back and forth, now on his third phone call with Skylinks Legal. "I need more time," Craig hissed into the phone. "Tell them we're trying to make contact. No, I don't care if she's sitting right here. She's not talking anymore." She wasn't, because there was nothing more to say. Suddenly, a soft voice broke through the tension. "Excuse me, Dr. Blake?" Nadine turned. It was a young black woman, probably in her 20s, dressed in a city planning department badge and holding a folder she clearly wasn't using for work at that moment. I recognized you, the woman said. My grad school professor made us study your airfield model integration paper, the one with the civic access zones and the equity blueprint. It changed how I saw transportation forever. I just wanted to say thank you, and I saw what happened today. You didn't deserve that. Nadine's expression softened. What's your name? Marissa. Well, Marissa, it's your turn now. Make sure they don't forget. Later that night, headlines would cover the freeze, the crisis meetings, the losses. But the real story wasn't about a shutdown. It was about a woman who built the system to hold people accountable, even if it had to hold her. And when that system was tested, it didn't hesitate. It protected her, just like she'd once promised it would protect others. Because real power doesn't scream. It builds frameworks, and then it waits for the moment they fail themselves. When the president's chief of infrastructure calls you on your personal line at 6:17 p.m., you already know the story has gone national. Nadine didn't answer at first. She sat in the back of the black SUV that picked her up from JFK Terminal 4, hands still resting quietly on her lap. She wasn't shaking. She wasn't even angry anymore. Just still. Her phone buzzed again. Caller ID, Marcia Hawthorne, White House. She sighed, then tapped accept. Nadine, please tell me this isn't as bad as it looks. Nadine looked out the tinted window as the Manhattan skyline blurred past. Depends on who's looking, Marcia. Across the country, executives at Skylinks scrambled through legal loopholes, frantic conference calls, and emergency PR strategy sessions. But none of them could find the lever that would stop the bleeding. Because the bleeding wasn't technical. It was moral. And it was very public. The video had hit 3.7 million views by the time Nadine's car pulled up to her brownstone in Harlem. Inside, the lights were low, just the way she liked it. She poured herself a glass of water, not wine, not yet, and stood by the window. Then came the second call. This one, unexpected. Dr. Blake, this is Monica Rhee with the Washington Herald. I know it's late, but we're preparing a feature piece for tomorrow's front page. I just need confirmation on one thing. Did you design the ethics tripwire protocol that triggered the Skylinks shutdown today? Nadine didn't answer immediately. Dr. Blake? She spoke slowly. Do you believe people deserve to be treated equally when they travel, Ms. Rhee? Yes, absolutely. Then that's all you need to print. She hung up. By midnight, the ripple had become a wave. FAA officials released a statement confirming that a federally funded compliance infrastructure audit system had issued an automatic suspension on Skylinks' operations due to detected ethical violations under Clause 47B. But the public had already found the heart of the story. A black woman built the system that finally punished the very industry that ignored her. The next morning, Nadine stepped into a room she hadn't entered in over a year. A small, quiet command center in a repurposed wing of her Harlem home, lined with screens and dashboards, each displaying live metrics on air traffic compliance, ethics breach alerts, and regulatory thresholds. A place no one was supposed to know existed. Except now, they would. Because this wasn't going to be a one-time incident. This was going to be a standard. At 8:11 a.m., her secure server received an encrypted message, requesting consultation to replicate Sky Ethics across 12 transit systems. Proposal includes Department of Transportation and 4 state partners. Meeting scheduled 10 August. Nadine closed her eyes. The system worked. At 9:45 a.m., another call came in, this time from Skylinks' board chair, Marianne Lockett. Her voice was professional, brittle, and exhausted. Dr. Blake, I'd like to formally apologize for what happened at Gate D12, but more than that, I'd like to request a private meeting. We've suspended the entire executive leadership of Skylinks as of this morning. Nadine's voice was calm. What exactly are you asking me for? We want to bring you in as chief ethics architect, not as a figurehead, as a decision maker, full access, full reform authority. Silence. Nadine sipped her coffee. Too late, she said gently. I've already accepted a broader offer. 2 hours later, She stood before a full panel at the U.S. Department of Transportation. A circular room, a dozen suits, and one woman in navy blue with gray streaks in her braids. No fanfare, no microphone, just clarity. "Let me be very clear," Nadine said. "This isn't about vengeance. This isn't about bad employees. This is about the invisible design choices that shape every travel experience, and how those choices repeatedly fail people who look like me. Yesterday, I didn't crash Skylinks. The system did. I just created the rules based on your own compliance language." A man in a gray suit cleared his throat. "And what are you proposing now, Dr. Blake?" "I'm proposing that we scale the system. Nationally, public transit, airport lounges, rail terminals. I want every point of entry to be accountable to the same ethical matrix. I want every traveler, black, brown, disabled, elder, veteran, trans, protected by default." "And what will you call it?" someone asked. Nadine paused. "The Blake Standard." The silence afterward wasn't awkward. It was heavy, heavy like realization, heavy like consequence, heavy like change. Back at JFK, the screen slowly flickered back to life. Skylinks was allowed to resume limited operations, under strict compliance review. Boarding groups were manually checked. First-class upgrades were triple verified. But something had shifted. Gate agents glanced at each passenger a second longer. TSA officers reviewed names without assumptions. And in Gate D12, a placard appeared on the wall. No spotlight, no PR campaign. Just black letters on brushed steel. "This gate honors the legacy of Dr. Nadine Blake, whose system made justice visible." That night, Nadine returned home to find a letter slipped under her door. It wasn't signed, just typed on an old typewriter ribbon. "They told me I didn't look like first class either. Yesterday, you made us all feel like we belonged. Thank you." Nadine smiled, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to cry. Not from rage, not from exhaustion, but from relief. Because the system she built didn't just work. It remembered who it was meant to protect. At exactly 7:45 a.m. the next morning, a sharp knock echoed across the beige conference room of Skylinks' Midtown headquarters. Every executive had already arrived. No one touched the croissant. No one sipped the lukewarm coffee. They were waiting. Then the door opened, and Marianne Lockett stepped in, flanked by two legal advisors and a visibly rattled VP of Public Affairs. Her face, usually poised and cool, looked worn, like someone who'd aged a decade overnight. She stood behind the podium, hands clasped. "Effective immediately," she began. "We are placing the entire crew of Flight 1723 on unpaid leave, pending a full investigation by the Federal Aviation Ethics Board. Additionally, we are issuing a formal apology to Dr. Nadine Blake, whose work, integrity, and legacy were violated in an act we can no longer describe as a misunderstanding." A hush swept through the boardroom. Marianne wasn't done. "And finally, Skylinks will enter a 90-day compliance review, during which our participation in all public-private aviation initiatives will be paused." That sentence hit like a blow to the chest. Paused participation meant frozen contracts. No federal money, no city deals, no transit hubs. Silence. Then someone whispered what everyone else was thinking. "She really shut us down." Across the country, news outlets picked it up in real time. CNN breaking, Skylinks places crew on leave after viral discrimination incident. MSNBC morning panel. She didn't raise her voice. She raised the standard. Telltale's editorial. A CEO was denied her seat. Now, the industry faces a reckoning. At home, Nadine watched quietly from her kitchen table. She wasn't gloating. She wasn't even smiling. She was measuring, gauging how deep the rot ran, watching which voices stood up and which ones scurried to rebrand themselves overnight. Around 10:15 a.m., she received a notification on her private ethics dashboard. Internal memo leaked. Voyager Airlines. Re-evaluating all onboarding diversity training modules. High alert on racial bias lawsuits. Urgent consults requested with third-party ethics experts. 2 minutes later, another alert. Stellar Jet press release. We have officially reached out to Dr. Nadine Blake's team to pilot the Blake Standard on select domestic routes. She knew what that meant. Damage control. They weren't interested in justice. Not yet. But they were scared. And that fear, that was leverage. Back at JFK, TSA agents, ground crew, and even janitorial staff spoke in hushed tones about the lady who froze a 3.2B airline just by walking away. Some said she cast a spell. Others claimed she was a federal agent undercover. Only a few knew the truth, that she had spent 20 years building a silent system to defend people like her from the exact moment she was told, "You don't belong here." Midday, Skylinks held their public press conference. Marianne stood before a dozen reporters. Flashbulbs clicked. Live streams ticked upward in viewership by the second. This event was not only a violation of one woman's dignity, it was a failure of our company culture, one that must change, one that will. Dr. Blake is not the exception. She is the standard. And if we cannot meet that standard, then we don't deserve to lead this industry. One reporter shouted from the back, "Was it true you didn't recognize her as the system architect?" Marianne didn't flinch. It wasn't just that we didn't recognize her. We ignored everything she represented. Later that evening, in a quiet corner of the Roosevelt Hotel bar, two airline CEOs met for an off-the-record drink. "We need to move fast," one said, glancing nervously at his phone. "This Blake Standard thing's not a one-off. She's got Washington on her side now." "We bring her in?" "Too late," the other replied grimly. "She's building something bigger, and we're either part of it, or we're obsolete." Back in Harlem, Nadine finally took a walk. Just herself. No assistants, no press. She stopped at a small corner cafe where the manager, a kind-eyed Haitian man in his 60s, handed her a free cup of tea. "It's not much, Madam Blake," he said, "but I saw the way they looked at you in that video. That's not how we treat royalty here." She laughed quietly, then noticed a little girl at the next table, watching her with wide eyes. "Are you the plane lady?" the girl whispered. Nadine knelt beside her. "I'm the rules lady," she whispered back. "I help make sure people are treated right, even on planes." The girl nodded solemnly. "Good, 'cause my grandma says people forget their manners in the sky." That night, Nadine opened her laptop and began drafting a proposal. Not just for ethics, but for retraining, restoring, reimagining. She titled the file, Operation Reclaim, a 12-month plan to redesign the passenger experience. Because this wasn't about revenge. It never was. It was about respect. And once you teach a system to see, you can't go back to blindness. Not anymore. They met in a windowless room 6 floors beneath the U.S. Department of Transportation. No press, no cameras. Just a handful of the most powerful decision-makers in the country. And one black woman in a navy pantsuit who refused to be underestimated. Nadine Blake didn't need a PowerPoint. She brought facts, stories, and data that breathed. When she walked in, no one stood. By the time she left, no one sat. The meeting was called under the code name Phase Delta, Transit Equity Acceleration. But everyone in the room just called it what it was, the Blake meeting. Seated around the polished table were senior advisors from the FAA, the Office of Civil Rights, 2 congressional aides, and 5 representatives from major transportation investment firms. All eyes were on her. "Let's skip introductions," Nadine began. "You know who I am. I know why you're here." She slid a single page across the table. "This is the next 90 days. The paper wasn't filled with buzzwords. It laid out, in stark bullet points, mandatory deployment of the Blake Standard across all federally funded terminals, real-time data tracking of racial and class-based service anomalies, installation of anonymous passenger ethics report kiosks in all major airports, new audit triggers linked to contract disbursement, and at the bottom, a simple clause. Failure to comply will result in automatic funding freezes within 24 hours. One investment partner cleared his throat. With respect, Dr. Blake, this kind of policy rollout takes months of vetting. She cut him off, softly. So did ignoring discrimination, and you managed that pretty quickly. A few uncomfortable chuckles rippled around the room, but she wasn't joking. Let's be clear, Nadine continued. I'm not here asking for permission. I'm here to coordinate. You all saw what happened when one woman got denied a seat. Imagine what happens if the entire nation starts paying attention. Silence. Someone from DIOT finally spoke. We have to balance industry stability with equity. There's a lot at stake. Nadine leaned forward. Equity is stability. You want planes in the air? Make sure every passenger is treated like a paying human being. You want public trust? Start by acting like the public matters. Then she took a breath and softened. Look, I'm not against airlines. I love flight. I dedicated my life to making it safer for everyone. But the current system is broken, and you all know it. So either we fix it from the inside, or we wait for it to collapse from the outside. The youngest person in the room, a senior analyst no older than 32, spoke for the first time. How do we get ahead of this, Dr. Blake? Nadine smiled, not with arrogance, with recognition. This was the question she was waiting for. She stepped to the whiteboard and drew a triangle. At the top, accountability. At the bottom left, dignity. At the bottom right, visibility. This is the new model. You want passengers to feel safe? They need to be seen. They need to feel like they matter, and they need to know you'll answer for your mistakes. She capped the marker and turned around. That's what the Blake Standard guarantees. By the time she left the room, 2 agencies had already signed on for pilot programs. A third, Midway West Airlines, requested an immediate consult. And when the door shut behind her, there was a pause. A long, quiet pause. Until one voice said, "We just witnessed the future of transportation." Meanwhile, back in Harlem, her team was already moving. Her lead developer, a queer Latino systems architect named Mateo, had spent the morning coding new alert parameters into the SkyEthics backend. "We just added multilingual filter triggers," he told her via secure Zoom. "Now the system can detect aggression and bias in over 30 languages." Nadine grinned. "You think small." "No, I think secure. But we're also ready for phase 2. I even bought the domain already." "What domain?" "flightjustice.org. Nadine paused, then laughed. "God, I love you." That afternoon, she returned to her alma mater, Howard University, for a closed Q&A with law students and future civil rights attorneys. Someone asked, "How did you stay calm when they humiliated you like that?" Her answer was simple. "Because I knew the system would speak for me." At 6:23 p.m., her phone buzzed. Unknown caller ID. Private. She let it ring once, then twice, and then picked up. "Dr. Blake, this is Karen Lowell, Senior Partner at Titan Infrastructure Ventures. We're interested in endowing a $25 initiative to support your ethics expansion nationally. We believe you're redefining more than just air travel. You're reframing public dignity." Nadine blinked slowly. That was the second time someone used the word dignity today. Maybe the world was learning after all. That night, alone in her garden, she watered her lavender and basil pots and listened to the silence. The real kind. The kind that comes after change has already started. The kind that tastes like clarity. She didn't need applause, or revenge, or even closure. She just needed to know that the next girl who looked like her wouldn't be told she didn't belong. And now, that future was being built, brick by brick, policy by policy, one standard at a time. The air inside the Grand Meridian Ballroom buzzed with the usual cocktail of ego, espresso, and well-practiced smiles. The annual Aviation Leadership Summit wasn't new to drama. Keynotes were often cutthroat, and side deals happened faster than the in-flight Wi-Fi they all loved to brag about. But no one expected her to walk in. Nadine Blake wasn't on the guest list. She didn't need to be. She entered just as the panel, Future of Passenger Relations, was wrapping up. On stage sat 5 airline executives, 4 men in suits, and 1 woman with the kind of polished disdain that came from decades of flying above consequences. They were patting themselves on the back. "We're proud of our first-class experience," said Gregory Langston, COO of Skylure Airlines. "Our team is trained to prioritize both safety and comfort. We don't see the kinds of issues that make the news." Nadine didn't wait. She stepped forward from the back of the hall, lifted the mic from a stunned tech assistant, and said, "Really? Because last week, your trained team physically blocked a paying passenger from boarding first class because she didn't look the part. That passenger was me." Gasps scattered like dropped champagne glasses. The room froze. Cameras turned. And for a moment, Gregory Langston looked like a man trying to remember if he had signed an NDA. "Dr. Blake," he started, shifting in his chair. "Don't Dr. Blake me now, Gregory," she said, voice calm but slicing. "You knew who I was when your people manhandled me at gate D12. Or maybe you didn't. Maybe you didn't care. But now you're here selling excellence, while my team is freezing $3.2 billion in contracts tied to the very companies sitting on this stage." A beat passed, then 2. Gregory's co-panelists leaned slightly back, like distance could somehow reduce liability. "This summit talks about innovation," Nadine continued. "Let's talk about innovation and accountability." She pulled out a small clicker and turned toward the projection screen behind the panel. New slides appeared, none of them in the conference schedule. The room saw a map of 74 airports where passenger discrimination was flagged in the last 18 months. Bar graphs showing racial discrepancies in upgrade approvals. A chart of over 9,400 passenger complaints. Organized, verified, time-stamped. "This data comes from our pilot Blake Standard deployments," she said. "Real stories, real pain. You've ignored them long enough." One executive coughed into his tie. Another picked up his phone. Too late. The feed had already gone live. Backstage, an assistant whispered to a communications director, "Telltale's just clipped this. They're streaming it now, already at 1.6 million views, and counting." Back at the mic, Nadine scanned the crowd. Her voice softened, but didn't lose its edge. "I didn't come here for revenge. I came because systems don't change unless someone walks in and refuses to stay quiet. I came for the single mom who was told she probably printed her ticket wrong. For the elderly man humiliated in front of his grandchildren. For the boy in a wheelchair told the aisle seat wasn't for those kinds of passengers." She paused. "I came because I didn't fight for a seat in first class. I fought to make sure every seat in this industry respects the person in it." A standing ovation didn't come right away. But someone clapped, then another, and then, like dominoes, row by row of industry leaders, students, investors, and even flight attendants rose to their feet. Some cheered, some stared, stunned. Some lowered their eyes, knowing full well they'd been part of the silence. Later, as Nadine left the building, her phone buzzed. A message from Matteo. "FAA just issued a statement. They're mandating Blake Standard protocols at all partner terminals, effective immediately." She exhaled and smiled. Not because she'd won, but because the room that once shut her out had finally heard her voice. Why, sunrise the next morning, Nadine Blake's name had trended on every major platform in North America. Black CEO calls out racist airline live on stage. Blake Standard now mandatory? FAA issues midnight mandate. Woman denied first class now reshaping the industry. But Nadine? She didn't post a thing. She didn't tweet, didn't live stream, didn't even grant an interview. While the media roared, she vanished from view. She was not missing, she was moving. Back in Harlem, in the quiet comfort of her brownstone kitchen, Nadine sipped coffee from her chipped Howard Alum mug and watched the headlines scroll on mute. The sound wasn't necessary. The faces said it all. Some were outraged, defensive executives in Navy suits calling her divisive or performative. Others were grateful, flight attendants, single parents, veterans, whispering "finally" under their breath. And some were scared, because what she'd done didn't just shake an industry, it exposed a value system. "This isn't about first class," she murmured to herself, pouring more coffee. "It's about first chances, first respect, first time someone said, 'enough.'" Across the city, reporters camped outside her foundation's office. They begged for a comment, a statement, a soundbite. But no one came to the podium. And inside, no one picked up the phone. Because Nadine's plan wasn't to speak. It was to let the system speak for itself. And it did. Monday. The stock of Skylure Airlines dropped 6.8% before noon. Internal memos leaked showing senior leadership scrambling to draft a diversity statement that didn't feel forced. Their marketing team quietly paused 3 ad campaigns featuring fake, inclusive scenarios. Tuesday. 4 former flight attendants came forward. Each had filed complaints over the last 5 years about discrimination they witnessed. None were ever addressed, but now, the media wanted their stories, and this time, they were believed. Wednesday. Congresswoman Lila Barnes held a press conference citing the Blake incident as the final straw in proposing the Passenger Rights and Equity in Transit Act, PRET Act. "Because nobody," she said into the cameras, "should be denied dignity at 30,000 feet. Meanwhile, Nadine stayed silent. She walked her dog, a rescued pit lab mix named Booker. She visited her mother's grave and left a white rose and a copy of that front-page newspaper. She texted Mateo and told him to hire 3 new developers. And when an email came in from a high-ranking executive asking if she would reconsider partnering on terms more palatable for both sides, she simply replied, "I already made my call." But the world wasn't done calling her name. A national morning show ran a special segment called The Blake Effect. School children reenacted her moment on stage for their ethics class. A spoken-word poet in Atlanta turned her speech into a viral TikTok performance that hit 12 million views overnight. Even the Wall Street Journal ran an op-ed. Blake didn't burn the house down. She built a better one next door. And yet still, no word from Nadine. Because this was never about celebrity. It was about system change. And real change, it doesn't need constant commentary. It needs consistency. So she stayed quiet, while the world got loud. Then, one quiet evening, while packing documents for an upcoming summit in Montreal, Nadine got a call from a familiar number. It was Eleanor, the woman from the gate, the one who had told her coldly that first class wasn't for people like her. Her voice now was different, hesitant, shaky. "Dr. Blake, I know I don't deserve your time, but I had to say something." Nadine didn't respond. She let her talk. "I saw what you did, what you built, and I realize now I wasn't just rude. I was part of a system I didn't even question. I was afraid of losing my job, but I was more afraid of seeing you as an equal, and I'm so deeply sorry." Still, Nadine said nothing, just silence, until, "I forgive you." And then, softly, "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. I'm building something so no one has to go through what I did. Even you." By Friday, public support was undeniable. 43 airport terminals across the country had pledged early adoption of Blake standard protocols. The Department of Transportation announced a grant expansion to support training. Even 2 rival CEOs publicly endorsed Nadine's vision. And still, she said nothing. Because sometimes, silence is the sharpest reply. In the end, Nadine never needed to raise her voice. She just raised the bar. What about you? If you were in Nadine's shoes, would you have spoken up or let your actions speak louder? Tell us where you're watching from and what you would have done. We read every comment. Exactly 1 week after the gate incident, the world finally heard her voice again. Not from a press conference, not from a podcast or news segment, but from a pre-recorded video uploaded quietly to the Blake Equity Foundation's YouTube channel at 6:00 a.m. No flashy graphics, no trending hashtags, just Nadine sitting at a table, a single folder in front of her, and a line that cut through the noise like a scalpel. "This isn't about me anymore." She looked calm, but focused. Behind her wasn't a company logo or a political banner, just a wall of hand-drawn artwork from kids in an after-school mentorship program, some of the same children her foundation helped fund through its educational arm. "I've been silent this week, not because I didn't have something to say," Nadine said, "but because the system needed space to respond to itself, and it did. Loudly." She listed no names, blamed no individual. There was no mention of Eleanor, the gate agent. No replay of the incident. No effort to turn this into personal revenge. Just data, vision, direction. "So let me tell you what's next," she said, flipping open the folder. Inside was a document marked in bold at the top. Blake Standards Initiative, Phase 2 Implementation. And with that, Nadine announced what many had speculated, but few believed could be real. A full-scale partnership between the Blake Foundation and the Department of Transportation, backed by the FAA and signed by 7 major domestic airlines. Together, they would launch a centralized national passenger incident database with anonymous reporting and mandatory 72-hour review policies, a blind audit system for upgrade decisions to ensure equity regardless of race, age, or gender, a quarterly ethics score publicly displayed for each airline based on both customer reports and internal accountability, and most importantly, passenger dignity training, co-developed with trauma experts, social equity scholars, and former flight crew whistleblowers. "It's not about punishing airlines," she said. "It's about raising the bar so everyone's dignity can fly." The comments section exploded. Within 30 minutes, the video passed 1 million views. By 9 a.m., 3 cable networks had cut to live coverage. Even late-night shows quoted her words. But Nadine? She shut off her phone, got in her car, and drove herself to the Bronx, where she sat on the floor of an old community center and helped build bookshelves with local volunteers. Because while the world debated her message, she was already building what came next. Across the country, ripple effects followed like clockwork. Airlines scrambled to issue statements of alignment. 2 CEOs who once criticized her now offered support and donations. Even political figures from opposing parties called the initiative a rare moment of clear leadership. But perhaps the most powerful response came from the people her video didn't name, but deeply impacted. A retired black pilot wrote, "30 years of flying, and I was told to stay quiet when they joked I only got my wings for diversity points. Today, I showed my grandkids your video, and we cried." A mother posted, "My autistic son was once pulled out of a boarding line because they said he looked anxious. Thank you for reminding the world that dignity doesn't have a dress code." And a former airline exec messaged anonymously, "I stayed silent for years inside the system. You made me believe again. I'm coming out. I'm testifying." Nadine never responded to the comments, because she didn't need to. She had already said what needed saying. Not with anger, not with outrage, but with structure, with policy, with vision. Later that night, after the video had hit over 10 million views, Nadine sat on her porch, her dog Booker curled at her feet. Mateo texted, "They're calling it the Blake Doctrine now." She smiled, not because of pride, but because she remembered her father's words, the last time she saw him in uniform. Real change doesn't make noise, it makes space. And she had made space. For every kid who'd been told they didn't belong, for every elder who got ignored, for every woman told to lower her voice if she wanted to be heard. She had made space. Now, the world would have to decide what to do with it. The room was too quiet for a place so powerful. 10 floors above Manhattan's glassy skyline, inside a secured boardroom at the Midtown Global Alliance Center, 7 airline CEOs sat in black leather chairs, some with arms crossed, some with faces unreadable, one pretending to scroll through his phone. At the head of the table sat Nadine Blake. She didn't bring an entourage, no publicist, no media, not even Mateo. Just her binder, and a leather portfolio marked Blake Charter, Executive Compliance Addendum. The air smelled of espresso and tension, the kind of tension you could cut with a letter opener, which coincidentally sat untouched in front of every CEO, next to a copy of Nadine's proposal. They'd all read it. What they hadn't expected was for her to walk in with no pitch, no PowerPoint, just a simple statement. Before I say anything else, let me be clear. You don't have to sign this. Eyes shifted. A few smirked, but Nadine didn't flinch. You just won't receive another dime from the Blake Capital Network, or any of our partners. Silence. Then one of them, Carl Everett from High Star Aviation, leaned forward. Ms. Blake, let's not pretend this isn't a negotiation. It's not, she said flatly. This isn't about punishment. This is about progress. You either want to be part of what's next, or you don't. She gestured to the binder. The Blake Charter isn't just a PR move. It's a policy framework designed with behavioral scientists, aviation ethicists, trauma-informed specialists, and yes, people who've been silenced for decades. It doesn't just protect passengers. It protects your people, your brand, your legacy. We already have DEI programs, another CEO interrupted. Nadine turned to him calmly. And yet, I was still told I didn't belong in first class. Silence again. A slow exhale from the far side of the table. Then Nadine pulled out the final sheet from her folder, a single-page financial brief. A table of $3.2 billion in active investments and pending funding allocations through Blake Foundation's network. Line by line, airline by airline, dates, terms, exposure risk. Sign the charter and the funding remains. Refuse, and our partners begin immediate divestment procedures. She folded her hands. I'm not bluffing, and frankly, I don't need to be here. But I came, because I believe we can do better, together. The CEOs exchanged glances. No one spoke. Then, quietly, from the far end of the table, the oldest CEO in the room, Margaret Liu of Sky Unity, stood. She had said nothing until now, but her voice carried weight. I flew cargo routes in the 80s when there were no bathrooms for women at terminals, she said. I know what exclusion feels like, and I'm tired of pretending we're not part of the problem. She reached for the pen, signed. That broke the dam. Within the next 4 minutes, 6 of the 7 CEOs signed the Blake Charter. The 7th, Jonathan Phelps of Airstream Nova, paused. My board will push back, he muttered. Nadine looked him dead in the eye. Then maybe it's time you get a new board. And then, he signed. A single moment. A single table. But the course of an industry was changed. When the last signature dried, Nadine stood. This isn't the end. It's the floor, not the ceiling. She looked each of them in the eye. Every 6 months, you'll be audited. Scores published. Failures addressed publicly. This isn't just a promise, it's a contract with the flying public. She packed her binder. Thank you. I'll see you in the skies. And with that, Nadine Blake walked out. No handshake photos, no applause, just impact. By the time she stepped into the elevator, an email pinged her phone from FAA Ethics Division. Subject: Blake Charter recognized as national model for equity compliance. She allowed herself a small smile, not for the press, but because she knew change had landed. 1 week later, same airport, same terminal, different air. There was no press waiting, no entourage, no speech. Just Nadine Blake, rolling her own carry-on down Terminal B at JFK. She wore no designer heels, no tailored power suit. Just sneakers, jeans, and a navy trench coat. A black baseball cap pulled low over her eyes. But everyone saw her. Not because she demanded attention, but because something had shifted since the last time she walked through these gates. A security officer gave her a subtle nod. A woman in line whispered to her daughter, "That's her. That's the one who changed everything." But Nadine didn't stop, didn't pose, didn't wave. She just kept walking, quietly, peacefully. For the first time in a long time, without tension trailing behind her. When she reached the first-class lane, the attendant at the gate didn't flinch. No suspicious stares, no sideways glances, no questions about ID, just a scanned ticket and a gentle smile. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Blake." Nadine blinked for a second, not because she was surprised at the respect, but because of how normal it felt. That was the real change. Not that people were falling over themselves to be kind, but that dignity was expected, built in, baked into the system. As she stepped down the jet bridge, the smell of fresh coffee and jet fuel filled the air. Inside the cabin, she made her way to seat 2A. No one blocked her path. No one questioned if she belonged. And just as she settled in, a flight attendant approached quietly. A young black woman with tight curls tucked neatly into a bun and a name tag that read Jordan. Jordan didn't fumble, didn't gush. She just leaned in and said, "Welcome back, Ms. Blake. We've got green tea steeped and ready, just how you like it." Nadine smiled, not because of the tea, but because of the tone. It wasn't performative. It was practiced, learned, lived. She looked out the window as the plane began to taxi. Below, dozens of ground crew members moved in perfect sync, the gears of the travel world spinning forward. Above, clouds parted for morning sun. Inside, Nadine finally exhaled. She thought back to that awful day. The embarrassment, the coldness, the sting of being told she didn't belong. She remembered the gate agent's glare, the silence of the bystanders, and the heat in her chest when she made that one call. But now, she thought about Margaret Liu, the first to sign. She thought about the thousands of anonymous passengers filing ethical reports for the first time. She thought about the little boy who sent her a letter that said, "I want to sit first class one day, but even if I don't, I hope they treat me like a king." The pilot's voice crackled overhead. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Flight 293. We're flying clear skies today, and we're honored to have someone special with us." Nadine chuckled quietly. "Here we go," she muttered. But the pilot didn't name her. He didn't turn it into a moment. He simply added, "Thanks to the changes in our industry, every passenger today flies with dignity. Let's keep doing better. Let's take off." The plane began to lift, and Nadine leaned back, closed her eyes, and let the sun touch her face. Not as a CEO, not as a headline, just as a human being, flying home. Meanwhile, in a boardroom across the country, a new training module was launching. At an airport in Dallas, a staffer was filing a bias complaint, no longer afraid of being ignored. At a terminal in Chicago, a grandfather in overalls was offered help with his bag, not judgment. And in an HR office in LA, a woman of color just got promoted to lead customer service compliance, thanks to a new ethical scoring system. These weren't miracles. They were choices, shaped by one woman's quiet refusal to be silenced. One call, one charter, one standard, that rippled through the skies like jet stream. Tell us where you're watching from, and if you've ever felt like you didn't belong in a space you earned. Your voice matters. Drop it in the comments below. Let the world know change isn't loud, it's just persistent.